and welcome back to this series dedicated to Orlando Furioso. I hope you're all doing very well. Today we're going to read and comment together Canto number 19 of Orlando Furioso. It's a very crucial canto, in fact, because it's the canto that sets up the central and crucial event or episode of the entire poem, which is Orlando becoming Furioso, or Roland becoming really furious and mad crazy. Ariosto tells us a very, very interesting episode at the end of Canto 18, which is the episode of Cloridano and Medoro, the two pagans or Saracens going into the Christian camp during the night and killing many of them. This is especially interesting, is a very interesting episode because it's almost a copy, almost a very faithful copy of a very famous episode in the Aeneid by Virgil in Book 9. The two friends in the Aeneid, instead of Cloridano and Medoro, are Nisus and Euryalus. And these are very famous names in the context of the Aeneid, because their episode is narrated with a particularly touching tone by Virgil. They were both serving under Aeneas, and they were both refugees from Troy in the aftermath of the war. In this particular scene in the Aeneid, Nisus and Euryalus enter the camp of the Latins while they are sleeping, and they start killing them all in a very silent way. Nisus is the older one between the two of them. Euryalus is the younger one. He's very, very young. Virgil even says that he hadn't started shaving yet. He still loved his mom a lot, and he was exceptionally handsome, just like Medoro is for Ariosto. What happens after they have been killing so many Latins during the night? Euryalus steals a glistening helmet, beautiful, beautiful helmet that under the moonlight, unfortunately, shines and attracts the attention of the enemy, of the Latins. And this is how the two of them are caught and they die tragically together. Something important to highlight here is that yet another time Ariosto is using some pagan, some Saracen characters to impersonate, to incarnate very high values, very high virtues that in his opinion were not present as often or as much in the Italian courts. In fact, as usual, we find immediately a little bit of a zinger against the Italian courts already here in the second stanza that says: Se come il viso si mostrasse il core, tal nella corte è grande e gli altri preme, e tale è in poca grazia al suo signore, che la lor sorte muteriano insieme. Questo umil diverria tosto il maggiore, staria quel grande infra le turbe estreme. If the real heart, the real feelings of everybody who lives at court were actually showing just like a dog's emotions are showing because of the dog's tail. That doesn't happen because these courts are so full of liars and hypocrites. We know that while they're running away from the enemy, Cloridano has been running faster because Medoro is still carrying the body of D'Artinello. He is still very faithful to his dead king. But Cloridano has been running away. And at a certain point we see Cloridano turning back and realizing that he has left Medoro behind. He feels very guilty. He has a moment of self-criticism and he starts running back to help Medoro. What he sees though very soon is that Medoro has been caught by Zerbino's men, the Scottish knights. And there is a beautiful simile here that Ariosto probably takes from the Thebaid by Statius, and he compares Medoro to a bear, a mama bear who is protecting her children, her pups. And this one is probably one of the most beautiful stanzas in the entire canto, because it's so elegant and so delightful. Here it is in Italian. Come orsa che l'alpestre cacciatore, nella pietrosa tana assalita abbia, sta sopra i figli con incerto core, e freme in suono di pietà e di rabbia. This bear is emitting sounds that sometimes are expressing rage and sometimes are expressing love for her children. Ira la invita e natural furore a spiegar l'ugne e a insanguinar le labbia. Amor la intenerisce, amor is love, e la ritira a riguardare ai figli in mezzo l'ira. Cloridano wants to help his friend, he loves him, and so he starts killing some of Zerbino's men. Zerbino cannot stand still anymore, and so he goes to kill Medoro. But as he sees him, he sees how handsome and how beautiful and also how elegant and of great manners Medoro is, and he decides not to kill him. At this point, however, one of his soldiers, who lacks discipline, decides to kill Medoro anyway, and he hits him, he wounds him, and Medoro falls on the floor. At the same time, there is a battle with Cloridano, and Cloridano gets killed. Zerbino and his men think that both the friends, Cloridano and Medoro, have been killed, and they are dead because they look dead on the floor. So they leave. But what we know as readers is that Medoro is not dead yet, he's only wounded. So we get to the middle of stanza 16, where we, in the narration, we can feel like there is a passage of time, or maybe a little breathing sounds from the narrator. Ariosto describes Medoro lying on the ground, probably dying because he's been mortally wounded. However, in stanza 17, here comes his savior in the image of una donzella, a girl who looks like a poor shepherd from that area. Stanza 17 says: Gli sopravvenne a caso una donzella, avvolta in pastorale e tumil veste, ma di real presenza e in viso bella, d'alte maniere e accortamente oneste. Immediately, Ariosto tells us that this is in fact Angelica. And we've seen Angelica many times before in the poem already. So Ariosto simply reminds us of all the very high-level knights who've been pursuing her and loving her, and every single time she has denied her love to them. Now we have this funny little episode of Cupid, or love, this pagan deity of love, who cannot accept this behavior from Angelica anymore, and so he decides to strike. He strikes her and Medoro and generates love between these two. It's a little ironic in stanza 20 how Ariosto refers to Angelica's heart as a hardened heart, and it's an unusual piety, an unusual soft feeling that she feels as soon as she is struck by the arrow of Cupid. Here is how Ariosto expresses this. Quando Angelica vide il giovinetto languir ferito assai vicino a morte, che del suo re che giacea senza tetto, più che del proprio mal si dolea forte. Insolita pietade in mezzo al petto si sentì entrar per disusate porte. She felt this piety, this soft feeling coming into her breasts from very unused doors. Che le fe il duro cor tenero e molle. Il duro cor is her hardened heart. E più quando il suo caso egli narrolle. So, poor Orlando, he has no idea what's happening here. It's basically the end of him, of his dreams. But it's actually happening, and what Angelica does, she tends to Medoro's wounds. She takes care of him, she restores him, and in these woods they also meet a shepherd who is going by. Together they decide to go to the shepherd's house, where Medoro receives more medical attention and he feels better and better. Now we get to the end of this other part, which we can arbitrarily set at the end of stanza 32. With the end of stanza 32, we have the end of this other portion of the canto. And it is at stanza 33 that Ariosto tells us that the worst possible thing that could happen for Orlando, in fact, is happening. And this is what Ariosto says. Angelica a Medor la prima rosa, the first rose, coglier lasciò, non ancor toccainante. Né persona fu mai sì avventurosa, chi in quel giardin potesse por le piante. They, in fact, get married with love, Cupid, let's say, as a witness, and also the shepherd's wife as the other witness. stanza number 37. The two lovers, Angelica and Medoro, set out for her land in Cathay. We remember that she's a princess from Cathay, so they decide to go there together to live in the future. They approach Barcelona, and this other portion we can say that ends at the end of stanza number 42. With stanza number 43, we enter a new chapter and we go back to Marfisa. We had left Marfisa in Canto number 18, out at sea. There was a storm at sea. And with this next chapter, we return to her and the knights that we had left in the storm. Marfisa keeps demonstrating her great courage. And this is another very important element to highlight throughout all the Orlando Furioso, how he is very ready to often highlight the strength of female warriors, of female knights, and just female characters in general. Marfisa is one of the most courageous, one of the bravest characters and strongest characters of the entire Orlando Furioso. So we are back, the scene is back on Marfisa and her knights in the storm. At this point, despite the fact that in Canto 18 their goal was to ship towards France, here they are driven back to a place in Syria called Latakia. However, the captain of the ship is very reluctant to disembark because he knows the story of the so-called femmine omicide. We find them at stanza 57, where Ariosto says, Il padron, the captain, narrò lui che quella riva tutta tenean le femmine omicide, the assassin women, di quai l'antiqua legge ognun qu'arriva in perpetuo tien servo, o che l'uccide. In any case, fear or no fear, they are towed to the shore, and so they have to face whatever is there. They are met with an old woman who explains and confirms the terms of entry in this port and in this land, in this city. Stanza 67, this old woman says to them, Gli è ver, dicea, che s'uom si ritrovasse tra voi così animoso e così forte, che contra 10 nostri uomini osasse prender battaglia ed esser loro la morte, e far con 10 femmine bastasse. Per una notte ufficio di consorte, egli si rimarria principe nostro, e gir voi ne potreste al camin vostro. And who is the bravest of our knights? It's in fact Marfisa, so she acts as their champion. And in fact she very quickly defeats 9 out of the 10 knights or the 10 warriors that are opposing her. When it comes to the turn of the 10th warrior, who is in fact their leader, he offers her a respite because of her valor, how honorably she has been fighting. But she refuses, and she wants to keep going with the action, with the fight. Their fight is a fantastic action scene, and full of special effects and sounds. They fight, but in the end, in fact, they wound each other, but nobody comes out victorious, and they decide to postpone the fight. There is a really fascinating little anecdote about stanza number 105. We know that Marfisa is pretending to be a man in these fights. Just like the other 10 warriors have been all men, and she's fighting now, their leader is the only one who survived, and they're still fighting. He still thinks that she is a man. What's interesting is that in stanza number 105, Ariosto wrote in the last 2 lines, he wrote the following: Ad ogni cenno pronta tu m'avrai, e come et ogni volta che vorrai. This is Marfisa speaking to the other warrior. And while she is still pretending to be a man, she's using the adjective for herself, pronta, which is a female adjective, is declined to the female, in the female form. So some scholars have wondered, did Ariosto not realize that this was a mistake because she should have pretended to be a man and therefore say pronto, which is the male form of this adjective? Or did Ariosto know about it and just left it there to show that Marfisa herself was being mistaken? What's the deal with this? Now, the really fascinating point is that this word was actually picked up by the great Galileo Galilei about 100 years after Ariosto, and with his logical, scientific brain Galileo proposed that the entire poem was changed from pronta to pronto, because to him this pronta in the female did not make sense for the story. And finally, this beautiful canto terminates with the two intrepid warriors taking off their helmets and surprising each other, shocking each other, because of course Marfisa turns out to be a woman, and so long hair, and the other warrior turns out to be very young, much younger than Marfisa would have thought. Who is this guy? Who is this valorous knight? Ariosto, as always, says, you have to keep reading in order to find out. Thank you so much for watching. Canto 20 will follow very soon. Bye.